The galaxy once believed humanity was insignificant, a noisy young species clawing its way out of a single yellow star system. But belief turned to fear when human ships crossed borders no one else dared to challenge. For centuries, the galactic concord ruled through ancient species whose civilizations had risen and fossilized long before humans invented fire. Their laws were carved into asteroid vaults and enforced by fleets older than most stars. Humans did not ask permission to explore, they did not kneel, and worst of all, they adapted. Where others specialized, humans improvised. Where others planned for millennia, humans changed strategy in a single generation. And where others feared extinction, humans treated it as a temporary setback. The first wars were small, border skirmishes disguised as trade disputes. But every time the Concord tested humanity, the response was faster, louder, and more creative than expected. A mining colony turned into a fortress overnight, civilian cargo ships refitted into missile platforms, and damaged vessels returned to battle wrapped in patchwork armor that should not have worked, but somehow did. By the time the Concord realized the truth, it was already too late. Humanity was not becoming a threat. Humanity already was one. The emergency summit was called on the crystalline world of Vale Tor, a neutral planet orbiting a dying blue giant, its skis fractured by auroras created from the planet's magnetic storms, a fitting place to decide the fate of an entire species. Representatives of 47 civilizations gathered, some projected as light, others carried in massive containment spheres, and a few attended only through quantum avatars that flickered whenever emotion spiked. At the center of the chamber stood a single human figure, Admiral Elias Rook, hands clasped behind his back, uniform scarred from years of command, eyes steady despite the weight of history pressing down on him. The High Arbiter spoke without sound, her thoughts translated directly into every mind present. Humanity has violated Concord Law 216 times, expanded without sanction, reverse-engineered protected technologies, and destabilized 3 member regions. Rook did not interrupt. He had learned that silence unnerved them more than defiance. The Arbiter continued, "You adapt too quickly. You refuse to remain in the place assigned to you. The galaxy cannot remain stable with your species unchecked." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, some species radiating fear, others resentment, and a few something dangerously close to admiration. Rook finally spoke, his voice calm. "Humanity was never given a place. We were born into a hostile universe and survived it. If that is a crime, then we plead guilty." The response was immediate and brutal. "The verdict has already been reached," the Arbiter declared. "Humanity is hereby exiled from the Galactic Concord. All human-controlled systems will be purged, all gates sealed, all navigational records erased. You will be driven beyond the mapped galaxy into uncharted dark." Even species who had voted for exile recoiled at the finality of it. Exile beyond the galactic rim was not punishment, it was a death sentence. Rook's jaw tightened, but he did not beg. "How long do we have?" he asked. "1 standard cycle," the Arbiter replied. "After that, any human presence within Concord space will be terminated." The chamber dissolved into cold light as the summit ended, and across human space, the alarms began to sound. News traveled faster than fear, and fear faster than anger. Entire worlds watched the broadcast replay as the word exile burned itself into the collective human consciousness, not conquered, not enslaved, but erased. On Earth, crowds gathered under rain-soaked skis, staring up at orbital shipyards already accelerating production. Old rivalries vanished overnight as governments unified under a single command structure. Children were pulled from schools into evacuation centers, cities near space elevators worked without sleep, and every ship capable of flight was drafted into what would soon be known as the Exodus Fleet. Scientists argued, generals planned, engineers swore at impossible equations, and through it all a single question echoed. Where do we go when the galaxy throws us away? The answer came not from politicians, but from explorers, those who had pushed beyond safe charts and returned with half-burned drives and impossible data. Beyond the rim, they said, there are shadows where stars behave strangely, where physics bends, where ancient signals whisper from before the Concorde even existed. If humanity was to be cast into the dark, then the dark would have to make room. Admiral Rook addressed the species one final time before departure, his message transmitted to every ship, station, and colony. They think Exile will end us, he said. They think the unknown will finish what they fear to start. But humanity was born in the unknown. We learned to breathe where we should have suffocated, to stand where we should have fallen. We are not running, we are advancing. As the first evacuation fleets ignited their engines, stars stretching into blinding lines of light, the galaxy watched humanity leave with a mixture of relief and dread. None of them noticed the ancient machines awakening beyond the rim, or the way the darkness itself seemed to shift, as if something vast had just opened its eyes. Humanity was leaving the galaxy, and the galaxy would one day regret letting them go. The moment the Exodus fleet crossed the galactic rim, every familiar rule humanity relied upon began to fail. Star maps collapsed into nonsense, navigation beacons spun wildly before going dark, and even the background hum of the universe felt wrong, quieter and heavier, as if sound itself struggled to move through the void. Ships emerged from jump space scattered across light years, some alone, some in drifting clusters, engines overheated and hulls creaking under pressures no simulation had predicted. Admiral Rook's flagship, the HSS Resolute, stabilized first, its experimental drives screaming as they forced reality to obey equations written only days before launch. Status reports flooded in, grim but alive. Millions had made it through the jump. Millions more were missing, not confirmed lost, but swallowed by the dark between stars where sensors refused to reach. Rescue protocols were attempted, then abandoned. Every second spent searching risked the entire fleet, and the bitter truth settled in. Survival now meant forward motion only. Beyond the rim there were stars, but they were wrong. They burned dimmer, their light tinted violet or red, orbiting nothing visible, while massive voids stretched between them like cosmic scars, places where gravity twisted and time lagged. Scientists aboard the fleet whispered in awe and terror, this region was old, far older than the mapped galaxy. Its physics worn thin by unimaginable ages. And humanity had been thrown into it blind. Weeks passed measured not by calendars, but by system failures and ration alarms. Food production ships became sacred, guarded more closely than weapons platforms, while engineers rewired civilian habitats into mobile arcologies where entire cities lived, stacked in rotating rings. Children learned constellations that had no names, and elders stared at stars they knew would never be seen again. Morale fractured, then hardened. There was grief, but no time for despair. The first contact came without warning. A survey ship on the outer edge of the fleet vanished mid-transmission, its final data burst showing space folding inward like a closing fist. Seconds later, something emerged. It was not a ship, not in any human sense. It had no engines, no visible weapons, only a vast lattice of black geometry that absorbed light and bent sensors into screaming static. Weapons fire passed through it, without impact, energy dissipating as if consumed. Panic spread, but Rook's voice cut through the chaos, calm and absolute. Hold formation, do not provoke, record everything. The entity circled the fleet slowly, deliberately, as if counting, scanning, judging. Then it spoke, not with sound, but with pressure inside the mind, an ancient presence brushing against human thought. You are loud, it conveyed. You tear holes where none should exist. Some crew collapsed, blood leaking from noses and ears. Others screamed as fragments of alien memory flooded their consciousness. visions of galaxies collapsing, civilizations erased not by war but by entropy itself. Rook forced himself to stand, focusing on the here and now. Humanity was listening, whether ready or not. We were exiled, he projected back. We seek only survival. The entity paused, time stretching uncomfortably. Exile is a young word. It responded, everything ends here eventually. Then it vanished, folding back into nothingness, leaving behind a silence deeper than vacuum. The fleet did not celebrate. They understood instinctively that they had been noticed. Days later, the consequences arrived. Automated systems began to fail in patterns too precise to be random. Power drains synchronized across multiple ships. Navigation errors repeating the same impossible coordinates. Someone or something was probing them, learning. Human scientists worked alongside newly unsealed artificial intelligences. Old restrictions abandoned in the face of extinction, minds both organic and synthetic racing to understand the rules of this ancient region. What they discovered terrified even the bravest among them. The dark beyond the rim was not empty, it was curated. Structures the size of solar systems lay dormant between stars, relics of civilizations so advanced they no longer needed matter as humanity understood it. And those civilizations had not disappeared, they had ascended into states humanity lacked the language to describe. The Concord had known fragments of this truth and had deliberately kept humanity away. Exile was not just punishment, it was containment. Humanity had been thrown into a graveyard of gods. The realization sparked anger hotter than fear. They didn't just exile us, people whispered, they fed us to monsters. But humanity did what it always had done best, adapted. Weapons were redesigned to target space-time distortions rather than hulls. Communication shifted to quantum resonance patterns mimicking the ancient signals detected in the region, and ships began flying in fractal formations that confused non-linear tracking systems. Losses continued, but so did progress. Then came the discovery that changed everything. A broken world drifting near a collapsed star, its surface scarred by impossible architecture, vast rings carved into continents, powered by energies still faintly active after eons. Exploration teams descended expecting ruins. They found a door. Not metaphorical, not symbolic, but a literal structure responding to human presence, unlocking layer by layer as if recognizing something familiar. Inside lay records, warnings, and a truth that shook the foundations of human history. Humans were not the first of their kind. Long before Earth formed, a precursor species had fled this same region, seeding distant galaxies with life capable of rapid adaptation, life that could survive the coming dark. Humanity was one of their last experiments. The Concord had sensed it, feared it, and acted too late. As Admiral Rook stood on that ancient world, stars bleeding strange light across the sky, he understood the scale of what lay ahead. Humanity had not been exiled to die. They had been pushed into their inheritance. And somewhere in the dark, the ancient watchers were beginning to realize their mistake. The ancient world did not feel abandoned, it felt patient. Human boots echoed across stone that had not known sound for millions of years, yet the air shimmered faintly as systems stirred from dormancy, responding to the presence of humanity like a long-delayed answer finally received. Exploration teams moved carefully through colossal halls etched with symbols that shifted when viewed from different angles, their meaning sliding through the mind rather than settling into language. Artificial intelligences interfaced with the ruins, not through ports or code, but through resonance, adjusting their processing patterns until the structures acknowledged them as acceptable echoes of their creators. What emerged was not a library, but a legacy. The precursor civilization had not vanished in catastrophe, they had retreated, abandoning physical existence to escape a cycle older than stars, a cycle of predation that fed on complexity itself. Every sufficiently advanced civilization eventually drew attention from entities born in the deep structure of spacetime, intelligences for whom galaxies were ecosystems and sentient species nothing more than energy-rich events. The Concorde had learned fragments of this truth and chosen stagnation as survival, limiting technological growth, suppressing adaptive species, and enforcing rigid hierarchies to avoid triggering the Watchers beyond the rim. Humanity had shattered that balance simply by being what it was. The ruins revealed why. Humans were designed, not in laboratories, but through guided evolution seeded across countless worlds, tuned for unpredictability, emotional variance, and rapid conceptual leaps, traits that made them dangerous to the predators of complexity. Chaos, it turned out, was armor. The precursors had discovered that the Watchers could not easily model or consume civilizations that refused to follow clean trajectories, species that reinvented themselves too often to be fully understood. Humanity was one such species, born not to dominate the galaxy, but to disrupt the cycle that consumed it. The weight of that knowledge settled heavily on the fleet. Some felt pride, others terror, many disbelief, but none could deny the evidence unfolding around them as human systems integrated seamlessly with technology millions of years more advanced. New drives were born from half-understood principles, folding space through asymmetry rather than brute force, allowing ships to move in ways that resembled intuition more than calculation. Defensive fields no longer blocked energy but confused it, forcing attacks to choose outcomes that benefited humanity simply because no other resolution made sense. Society itself began to change. Rigid command structures softened into adaptive networks, leadership rotating based on context rather than rank, civilian and military roles blending until survival became a shared responsibility rather than an order. Children grew up fluent in paradox, learning physics that admitted uncertainty as a feature rather than a flaw. Humanity was no longer merely surviving beyond the rim, it was evolving. The Watchers noticed. The first assault did not come as fleets or weapons, but as pressure. Entire sections of space began collapsing into probability storms, events rewriting themselves mid-occurrence, ships flickering between states of existence, crews remembering futures that never happened. Panic threatened to tear the fleet apart, but the precursor systems reacted, amplifying human unpredictability into a shield. Where the Watchers attempted to impose outcomes, humanity supplied too many alternatives, reality refusing to settle on a single path. In one instance, a colony ship simultaneously exploded, survived, and escaped, the final state chosen not by physics, but by collective human expectation. The Watchers withdrew, confused, injured in ways no weapon could achieve. For the first time in recorded cosmic history, something older than the galaxy had been forced to reconsider. Admiral Rook convened a council not of admirals and politicians, but of engineers, philosophers, artists, and children, those whose minds represented the full spectrum of human variance. "We were made to be different," Rook said, "but difference alone is not purpose. We must choose what we become." The choice came sooner than expected. Signals from the galaxy, faint but unmistakable, began leaking through the rim, Concorde space in chaos. Without humanity as a pressure valve, the old balance had collapsed, stagnant civilizations triggering the very attention they feared, Watchers probing inward, drawn by accumulated complexity no longer dispersed by human chaos. The galaxy was burning slowly, politely, quietly. Some voices in the fleet argued for isolation. Let the Concorde face the consequences of its fear. Let the galaxy reap what it had sown. Others argued that Exile had freed humanity from old constraints, giving them the chance to end the cycle forever. The ruins offered one final revelation. The precursors had failed not because their theory was wrong, but because they acted alone. A single species cannot generate enough unpredictability to shield an entire galaxy. But a coalition could. Humanity had a choice: remain beyond the rim as inheritors of a broken legacy, or return as something entirely new, not conquerors, not saviors, but disruptors of inevitability. Rook stood beneath an alien sky, feeling the weight of every human life depending on his next words. "We did not ask for this role," he said softly, "but we are here now. The galaxy threw us away because it feared what we might become. Let's show them they were right and wrong." As the fleet began preparations not for escape, but for return, the Watchers shifted uneasily in the dark. Humanity was no longer running from exile. They were preparing to end it.